How do we gauge our recommendation for carbohydrates based on activity? If I have a 2 hour session, we'll take a hypothetical person that has a metabolic rate of 2,500 calories. Now I have a 2 hour zone 2 session that evening. How should I adapt my carbohydrate intake for the demands of that session?
Yeah, this is kind of where we're a little unorthodox with how we work this with our athletes, and this is just like over time we've found that this is the easiest way to do it is so we will have kind of a carbohydrate target for the day, but in terms of like fueling before and during workouts, we don't count those carbs towards their like carb target for the day, if that makes sense. So if they need carbs for that workout, take that, but we're not going to count that towards like if they're maybe, let's say like macronutrient wise, like 50% carbohydrates for their calories of the day, we won't count the carbs that they're taking in on the bike towards that. So that way they're still fueling their workouts well, and then we're still keeping those carbohydrates in check the rest of the day.
And how far do you extend this discount? Do you extend that discount to the meal just before their ride?
If they're having like a snack right beforehand, I'll say, yeah, we don't need to count that. But if they're having like a meal, like an hour or 2 hours beforehand, I'm like, well, that's like your breakfast or your lunch, we're going to count that meal. But if you're like 15 minutes out and you're taking, some energy chews or some crackers or some sort of carbs to fuel that workout, then I'm like, yeah, we don't need to count that. I try not to get too like heavily detailed, if that makes sense, because I want nutrition to also feel not like very strict. I want it to feel like free and flexible and not like this regimented diet for people.
I guess there must be a tipping point though. Like if I'm, say, a Saturday morning ride and now I'm going out for a 5 hour Saturday ride, that's got to impact the breakfast I'm having pre-ride.
Yeah, that's sometimes the problem with those long rides. And I just had this conversation with an athlete yesterday who rode over his lunch hour. And so it's like, okay, we gotta have to make up that nutrition that you didn't get from lunch elsewhere in the day. So we were doing it through breakfast, some snacks, and dinner. But then we still had him fuel that ride really well. We didn't count that nutrition towards his targets, but we just made sure that elsewhere in the day we were being strategic. And if you're going for a 5 hour ride, I would make sure that we're trying to get in a really decent breakfast beforehand, and then trying to optimize recovery nutrition the rest of the day. But you still might come up short, and that's why the rest of those days afterwards are so important for making sure you're nailing that nutrition so you can help yourself recover really well.
Is your terminology around breakfast deliberately vague to keep it simple? Like I think you said a decent breakfast. Is that like what's decent to me might be different to what's decent to you and decent to Joe?
Yeah. So a decent breakfast would be like 30 grams of protein, good amount of carbs. If you can get some micronutrients, so like some fruit and or vegetable. That would like for a meal.
On this now, but what's a good amount? Are we 40 grams, 120 grams for carbohydrates?
Oh, let's see. It would depend.
Or is it
on the
body
athlete,
weight dependent?
Like if you were...
I guess my confusion on this is I've seen a recent vlog, which a lot of people are seeing because I got, I think, 300 or 400,000 views with Remco getting ready for a 5 hour training ride. And the volume of food, Remco's a 66 kilogram rider. The volume of food that he ate for breakfast, it's like something from a competitive eating contest. It's more food than I'd eaten an entire day. And he had for breakfast, and he's literally forcing it down himself. Glass after glass of orange juice, oatmeal, cereal, bagels, scrambled egg. And then he's into sports-specific stuff like bars and stuff, and he hasn't even got on the bike at this point.
Yeah. Well, I've done, before a race, I had a trail run end of September, and from the time I woke up at 5 a.m. to the time I started the race at 9:30, I probably had 160, 170 grams of carb that morning. And I felt great during the race. I didn't really plan on taking that. I didn't really realize I was taking that much until afterwards when I added it up, and I was like, oh, I actually took in a really decent amount of carbs. So if you're going out for a 5 hour ride, I would say at least 100 grams of carb But if you're going out for an hour ride, then you could do something like 60. Yeah,
Okay.
it's going to vary depending on the glycogen demand that you're looking at needing in that ride.
So what was your decision making framework for that ultra?
For that trail run?
Yeah, for the thought of taking in 170 grams of carbs.
Yeah, I didn't really like pick a number. I was just thinking like, okay, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. I've got a 2-hour drive. I'm going to have a little breakfast beforehand. I love pancakes and syrup is always like a pre-race routine for me. So before I left, I had some pancakes and syrup. And then on the drive there, because it was going to be a really hot race for fall here in Minnesota, and I'm a very salty sweater, I put a couple scoops of Scratch and I think a packet of liquid IV or something. Or no, I think a like precision hydration tab in there, like the 1500 tabs. And then drank that on the drive, plus a Morton bar. And then I had some like energy chews like 15 minutes before I started. So yeah, it ended up like adding up throughout the morning. But you know, when you're getting up at 5 a.m. and you're racing until 9:30, I was like, I'm just going to take in the carbs gradually throughout the morning. And it set myself up nicely for the run because I had just started training for like 6-8 weeks. So I wasn't really great about my intra running nutrition, so I didn't take as many gels as I probably should have during the race, and so that pre-race carbs really saved my butt.
And how do you handle post-race nutrition in a way that supports kind of our overarching goal for the podcast of supporting fat loss while maintaining recovery?
Yeah, I think it's good to go in with a mindset of like, okay, I got done with this race, and I need to make sure that I really help my body bounce back from this. So your muscles are tired. They need to get fed. They prefer carbohydrates. You want to reload those glycogen stores. So making sure you're getting a good dose of carbs. I would say within like 30-45 minutes, if you can get some sort of carb-rich snack with some protein, that'd be great. But if you're already due to have a meal, trying to get a meal in within 1 to 2 hours afterwards would also be excellent.
How much carbs and protein do we need to get in that recovery period?
If you can get in like 20 grams of protein and 60 to 80 grams of carb would be great.
3 to 4 to 1 ratio?
Yeah. 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, somewhere in there. And it's going to depend on the race. Like if it was a short race, you can do 20 grams of protein, 60 grams of carb. If it was a 5-6 hour long race, then you'd want to do more carbs because your glycogen stores are going to be really depleted after those longer endurance rides.
I've seen some pro athletes playing around with caffeine post-ride as well to help increase absorption of carbohydrates. Is there any merit in that?
Oh, I don't know if I've heard that one. I'd have to look. I mean, we take a lot of caffeine like before and during. I think there's definitely lots of research in the benefit of that. I don't know if afterwards necessarily. Maybe. I'd have to look.
The supplement area is interesting because it's constantly changing. It's so marketing driven as well. Like we're seeing ketones like have a big marketing push in the last 24 months. And is that an area you've looked into?
The research is really mixed. Like some show that there's benefits to ketones and some show that it's actually hindering performance. So for me, I'm not on board with that. I'm going with the carbs because we have years and decades of
especially how expensive the ketones are.
And like they taste terrible.
Shocking. Shocking.
I mean, I've never tried them, but I've heard they taste absolutely horrendous. I'm like, why would you do that? Like when carbs are delicious.
And any other supplements you're recommending as a staple for athletes? Creatine?
I've kind of gotten on board with creatine this year. I started taking it myself. There's this little bit of fear of the water retention. People saying like their weight go up a little bit. But I find that, performance-wise, you have strength benefits to taking creatine. If you get into your, main season and you want to go off it for a little while, just if you're worried about that water retention, I think that's
how
fine.
bad is the water retention?
It's like
especially if you're microdosing. I have friends who are
like
bodybuilders and they macrodose it, and yeah, I've seen water retention there, but with like
Yeah, if you're
microdose.
taking the recommended dose of like 3 to 5 grams a day, you might see like a kilo of water retention, if that. I think what the research has shown is like 0.8 kilos
Okay. Well, it's
in
not,
water retention.
it's definitely not zero. And I definitely have seen good data as well on even cognition benefits of taking creatine,
Yeah.
which is interesting in a world where, 1 in 3 of us is now going to have dementia or Alzheimer's when we're over, the
Yeah,
last
they're actually going to
marginal
start
decade.
doing more research for creatine for Alzheimer's as well, which is really cool.
Is there something linked with caffeine and Alzheimer's as well? I've seen something popping up.
No.
I'm a bit of a headline reader, so I'll need to dig into that one a bit more.
Possibly. I don't know if I've seen that one.
So I think I've got a good picture of what I need to be doing and what I don't need to be doing heading into the next 6 to 12 months with my training. So I'm sure I'll think of many more questions and we'll get you back on for a round 2. But
Yeah.
I think for now I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your time.
start with this advice, and then like I'll come back in a few months and see how you're doing, and then we'll go to the next level of discussion. But honestly, like if you're struggling with it, it might be just the best route to like work one-on-one with a dietitian, because then we can really like hone in and optimize that body comp nutrition while you're still performing well. Like that's where I think sometimes like if you're just struggling to do it on your own, because I'm even in my own little body comp journey now that I'm back to training again, and I've been having kids. I'm like, all right, I want to get back down to like like a race physique. And so sometimes when I'm like with my own nutrition, I'm asking like my team member Mary, who's a dietitian. I have to get 2 dietitians on my team. I'm like, hey, here's my numbers. Can you just like help me with this? And she's like, well, if you were my client, this is what I tell them. I'm like, perfect. Okay. I just needed someone to tell me that even though I work with athletes on a daily basis on this, when it's your own nutrition, sometimes it's just hard. There's this mental block, and it's nice to have someone else kind of come in and be that like guiding voice for you.
100%. And I'll drop your contact details in the description below. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can.
Awesome.
Alex, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We have 3 long form podcasts every week. Some of them are 90 minutes or 2 hours long. And I realize you're busy. Sometimes it's hard to cut through the noise and figure out the signal, figure out what the important parts are of these conversations. So I've taken your feedback, and once a week I'm delivering to your inbox a newsletter called The Saturday Spin. It's a 4-minute read or less, and it's going to break down the very best thing I've learned on the podcast this week. So it's insights from the biggest names in the world tour, physiologists, sports psychologists, and coaches. It's completely free to sign up to the newsletter. All you have to do is go to roadmancycling.com, stick in your email address, and once a week on a Saturday morning, I will deliver the Saturday Spin newsletter direct to your inbox. The link is down below. Go sign up.